Hello, and thanks for joining us today. I'm super excited you could be here. So today we're talking about some of the most important issues that we can really talk about as an entrepreneur, because first of all, we get so affixed on making money that we do a really horrible job of protecting the money that we make. And it's interesting because I personally and so many around me have been kind of taken down almost financially by inside people because we don't think enough about protecting the assets, protecting the wealth that we have actually built. And so we're going to be diving in today. We're also going to be talking about the Corporate Transparency Act because there's a lot of things you need to know. And if you don't know these things, you can get yourself into a heap of trouble. So we're going to be diving into that amongst some other things. And I've got two brilliant guests with us that I want to introduce to you guys right now. So first of all, I want to introduce Garrett Sutton. Now, Garrett is a corporate attorney and asset protection expert who has sold over 1 million books that are guiding entrepreneurs and investors. So some of his best-selling books include Start Your Own Corporation, Loopholes of Real Estate, and Fail Not Fail. So for over 30 years, he has run a practice assisting clients in protecting their assets through his companies, Corporate Direct and Sutton Law Center, which currently help over 14,000 clients maintain their entities. Now, Garrett is also a rich dad advisor for Robert Kiyosaki and is the president of Sunstream, a streaming platform focused on kids' financial education, which is super cool. And then Ted Sutton is with us. Now, Ted is actually Garrett's son and a licensed attorney as well. And he has a BS in mining engineering from the University of Utah, but decided to attend law school after realizing he was more interested in legal matters. Now, Ted graduated from the University of Wyoming College of Law in 2022 and is licensed in both Wyoming and Nevada. Now, at law school, he served as the student director of the business entrepreneurship practicum, which he helped clients from and maintain LLCs. And Ted now works at Corporate Direct, focused on ensuring clients comply with new Corporate Transparency Act, which we'll be diving into today. In addition to his legal work, Ted is also involved in financial education for children. He is the author of the free ebook, 5 Tricks to Teach Your Kids About Money, available on the Sunstream website, the streaming platform that his father focused on kids' financial literacy and professional development. Guys, welcome. Thanks for coming in with us today.
Thanks, Ty. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, Ty.
Yeah, I'm really glad you guys could be here. So let's talk. There's a lot of stuff we have to talk about. One of the first things I want to address is asset protection, because I have myself dealt with this and had others, and I just had a conversation literally last night with one of my buddies, and he said this happened, and somebody was married, and the whole thing was a setup. Like, she went in and took him for like $7 million. And I hear these stories. It's not surprising in my world to hear these stories of people that are just not taking the smart steps to protect their assets, which is astonishing to me. Super smart entrepreneurs, really good at making money, and are really bad at protecting our wealth when we make it. So you guys tell me, though, from what you see, because you deal with so much of this, why is asset protection so important?
Well, I mean, we live in a very litigious society. Our society allows attorneys to sue people and keep 1/3 to 40% of what they collect. There are incentives built into the system for lawsuits. And now every billboard you see is in a wreck, get a check. So that attitude is out there in the country, and we need to take steps to protect ourselves in the face of it. Now, the system allows not only lawyers to collect a contingency fee, but the system also allows us to protect our assets with LLCs and corporations. So we're not going to change the legal system. We're going to use it to our advantage as best we can. And so once you get started, you realize that people can sue you for whatever. Something happens in the business, you get in a car wreck, you need to start protecting your assets right off the bat. And that's what Ted and I do here at Corporate Direct, is help people understand how you can protect yourself. It's not expensive, but you have to constantly maintain these entities to stay protected. So those are the services that we offer, Ty.
I love that. One of my buddies is an asset protection attorney, and he goes, let me explain it to you like this. He goes, some people just take their stuff and throw it in the field. He goes, other people put it in the field and then build a building around it. Other people put a moat around the building. Other build a castle with cannons. I'm like, I want the castle with cannons and the moat. That sounds good to me. But it was really interesting way to describe it, because it's very true. Like, a lot of us just do not think about that stuff, and it's just wide open. But here's another thing that relates to that. A lot of us are solicited as we start to accumulate wealth by wealth management companies, right? So what's the difference there? Because I think some people are dealing with a wealth manager and they think that their assets are protected because they're doing that. So can you give me an idea of the difference there?
Yeah, the difference is, you can certainly work with a wealth manager, but it depends on how you hold the assets. If they're in your individual name and you get in a car wreck, someone can sue you personally and reach those assets. You can always work with a wealth manager by having your assets in an LLC, which are much better, provide much better protection than just holding them in your individual name. We like Nevada and Wyoming for these LLCs. They offer the best asset protection out there. Wyoming also provides privacy. They don't list your name on the state website. But you can work with a wealth manager or anyone else. You just want that wealth manager to know that your account is going to be held in the name of an LLC. Now, Charles Schwab and all the big brokerage companies know how to do this because most of their clients hold their accounts in LLCs. So when you have a brokerage account, for example, Ty, and everything's in your name, when we switch to an LLC, there's not a taxable event. You haven't sold the stocks and bonds to put them into the LLC. You're just transferring how those are held from your name into the name of the LLC. There's no taxable event. And believe me, Charles Schwab and all the other big brokerage accounts know how to handle these types of transactions.
So I want to look at this on the business side and on the personal side. On the business side, common things that I hear is that my IP should be in a separate entity than the actual business that I'm running. Like the software, we're a software company. So our software, our IP, that should be in a separate holding company than the other company. So can you speak to that? Because I think that's something a lot of us entrepreneurs hear.
Yeah, we do that a lot for our clients. So you have a business that's operating and it could get sued. And someone suing the business directly can get what's inside the business, your accounts receivable, all your assets. If you have the intellectual property in a separate LLC that's licensing the intellectual property back to the main company, you have one step of removal. You have one step of better asset protection. Because when you sue the operating company, you don't have a claim against the LLC holding company that holds the intellectual property. So we just want to put up as many real or perceived roadblocks as possible. And the intellectual property holding LLC is a great and very many people use this strategy.
So on the LLC, on the personal side, I get this question a lot when I'm on live streams. So the question is how many LLCs do you need? And what I mean by that is that some people think you need a separate LLC for every property you own, a separate LLC for every vehicle you own, a separate LLC for most of your major assets, whether it be an airplane or a boat or whatever that may be. Can you give me some insight there?
Yeah, we don't want to set up more entities than you need. It is a judgment call. We leave it up to the client. But for example, if you have 3 properties, each worth $2 million each, I would have 3 separate LLCs. Because if you put all 3 properties into one LLC and there's a problem at one property, they can sue and reach inside that LLC and get the 6 million instead of just the 2 million for the one property. So we do like to segregate assets. At the same time, there are plenty of promoters out there that want you to set up way more LLCs than you need. And that's not our strategy. We set up enough to protect you and make sure that you stay protected by always doing the filings, always following the corporate formalities.
Besides LLC, what are some other common strategies that you guys deal with regarding asset protection?
Well, Ted, which one do you like?
I think equity stripping can be a good strategy. I mean, for the most part, we like using LLCs. But if there's issues with transferring title or other circumstances that are present, there's this one technique we like using called equity stripping. And that's where if you have, a rental property, we set up a separate LLC that lends money to the property, and it has the first deed of trust on it. And in exchange, they get a line of credit back. And so the benefit there is that, if somebody were to check the property records, they would see that the LLC has a first deed of trust or a second deed of trust on the property. And, the benefit there is that the property appears to be more encumbered than it actually is. In court, you'd have to tell the truth because it's a line of credit. But, having that second deed of trust, having that line of credit with that LLC, it just deters creditors in the event that your property's sued. So, that's another strategy that we employ. But, most cases, just setting up an LLC for the rental property is the best way to go.
I appreciate that, Ted. What about trusts? Another thing we commonly hear about when it comes to asset protection that a lot of entrepreneurs are not familiar with. What are trusts? How do they work? And do they really have a place in helping us protect our assets?
Well, they do have a place. A trust, for example, a living trust, will help you avoid probate. Probate is a process when you pass where the court supervises the distribution of your assets. If you have a living trust, basically that document says, I know where I want the assets to be distributed. I'm appointing someone I trust to take care of that. And you don't have to go to court to process all these distributions. And the probate attorneys make pretty good money out of probate court. So we want to avoid that too. The problem with these promoters selling living trusts is they go one step too far in saying that the trust provides asset protection. It doesn't. The living trust provides zero asset protection, but it works together with the LLC. The LLC gives you the asset protection. The LLC in turn is owned by your living trust, which gives you the probate avoidance. So you want to have both. At the start, certainly you want the LLC, because the joke I tell in my class is you're more likely to be sued than die. So, we want to set up that LLC first. And then when you're ready for the living trust, the LLC is owned by the living trust. So there's a lot of misinformation out there, Ty, about these living trusts. Now, there are irrevocable trusts, which aren't revocable. You can't change them. And those do provide some asset protection. We just find them to be very expensive. So the traditional client of ours has an LLC on title to the property. Say it's in Ohio. You have an Ohio LLC on title to the property. We want the protection of the Wyoming LLC in case you get sued personally. So the Ohio LLC is owned by the Wyoming LLC, which is then owned by you or your living trust. That's how they all work together.
I appreciate that explanation. It's the best explanation I've ever heard in a way that it's easy for all of us to understand. Because as good as we are at running businesses, we're really bad at all this kind of stuff.
Well, they don't teach this in school. I mean, you should learn about this in high school.
It's kind of astonishing that they
Yeah.
don't, and how much of this has to be self-learned until we run into somebody like you guys that actually can help us in all these areas.
Yeah.
Right.
What about insurance? That's another thing as entrepreneurs I think we deal with is that, well, this is going to be a broad question, because on the personal side, I hear about umbrella policies, right? For LLCs. Not only is it enough to have an LLC, you maybe, and I'm just throwing out what I hear, that's why I'm asking you for accuracy. There's an umbrella policy you should have, and the umbrella policy says the LLC does get sued, then they go after that insurance, and it's like another layer of protection for you. Is that really a thing?
Yeah, so we recommend having insurance because insurance is the first line of defense. In the event your property's sued, you can have home and auto insurance. Just the general liability. Then having an umbrella policy on top of that can be helpful because it can provide $1 million of additional coverage for a few $100s a year. And that can be really advantageous. But the thing is insurance is only the first line of defense, and insurance companies have an economic incentive to not cover every claim. And so, if you only use insurance, you're putting that risk in the hands of the insurance company. And if they decide to not cover your claim, then all of your personal assets are on the table. So, having insurance is really important, but having the LLC limits your liability because you have control over it. And if somebody sues on your property, they're limited to the equity in that LLC instead of being able to go after your personal assets. So they do work in tandem together. I think having, general insurance, umbrella insurance, and an LLC is just the best strategy to have when it comes to protecting yourself.
And one other thing, Ty, is, attorneys are good at getting at insurance money. So, if you get in that horrific car wreck, and that's one of the bigger risks out there, having enough insurance, auto insurance, an umbrella policy on top of that, the attorneys know how to get at that. When your assets are held by a Wyoming LLC, attorneys are not good at getting the distributions out of a Wyoming LLC. So we like to have both. The umbrella policy with insurance that the attorneys can get at, there's enough money there. They leave you alone on the Wyoming LLCs because it's not a good use of their time. They're better off going for the next case that has insurance monies. So I always recommend our clients have that personal umbrella policy. And as Ted mentioned, $1 million of coverage is only, $400 a year. So it's pretty good insurance.
As entrepreneurs, what other kind of insurance do you think we should have? Because there's a lot to choose from. And it seems like something will happen in the business and our attorneys will say, do you have insurance for that? I'm like, I didn't even know insurance for that existed, right? So like, what does that look like? What other kind of insurance do you recommend to your clients that they have within the business for any number of different things?
Well, if you're a professional, you want errors and omissions policy that, if you make a mistake, you're going to be covered. A doctor needs malpractice insurance, as do attorneys. There are a number of policies. If you have a brick and mortar store, people come to your business, you want to have slip and fall type insurance, general liability insurance. If you take a lot of money or do a lot of business over the internet, there's a new policy that you should look into for internet activities. So that is something that, if someone hacks into your system and takes sensitive information, there can be a lot of lawsuits over that. So you want to have these cyber liability policies. That's a new policy to look into. But we always recommend our clients have insurance. As Ted said, that's the first line of defense. These entities are the second line of defense.
Garrett, you mentioned probate earlier, and I think that's one of the biggest fears that we have is that we work so hard to make this money and then the money doesn't get passed back down to our heirs. So any recommendation there? I mean, what should we be doing to make sure that we're protected so the money that we're making and the assets that we have get to who we want them to get to versus the government? Not that I don't like the government, love the government, just like not to have the stuff that I would rather go to my kids.
Right. I mean, you worked hard for your money. It shouldn't go to the government. It should go to your heirs, your kids and your family. And, probate will allow that. There's a checklist for probate, but you just have to go into court. It can take up to a year to clear through the probate process, and the attorneys make a lot of money on it. So to avoid probate, we set up the living trust, and it's done by an attorney in your local area. We don't set up living trusts. But, it's going to cost you $2,000, $2,500, but it's going to save you $50,000 in attorney's fees at the end. So at the start, we want the LLC. If you have property, you have businesses, we want the LLCs protecting those, owned by a Wyoming Holding LLC. The Wyoming Holding LLC is owned by your living trust, which dictates who gets what when you pass. So that is kind of the comprehensive plan for most of our clients and for most of your clients, Ty. I'm sure they're doing the same thing.
So all this makes a lot of sense, also very overwhelming and confusing, right? So if I want to create an asset protection plan with you guys, if I'm like, those guys are brilliant, they know exactly what's going on, what you guys do. And I'm like, I want to do this, but I don't know where to start. What does the process look like to get with you guys to start a process of creating an asset protection plan?
Yeah, so you can start off by going to corporatedirect.com. We have a lot of good content on there. I write a few articles a month. I also post videos on YouTube once a week. So you have a bunch of free information that you can engage in. And then once you're ready and you want to set up an LLC, you can schedule a consultation with one of our incorporating specialists. You'll be scheduled for a free 15-minute consultation. And you can find that at corporatedirect.com/schedule. So, you can get started, by scheduling the consult there. We have incorporating specialists who are very knowledgeable, who know a lot about how to properly protect people's assets.
And we'll send you a quote so you know exactly what everything costs. I mean, too many of these incorporating services have all these hidden fees, and we don't. We'll just let you know what everything costs. Another thing, Ty, that we do is we answer the phone. When people call and their clients and they have a question, we'll answer the phone. So that's a really good service these days.
Ted, I want to direct this to you. we've heard some of us have heard some of us have heard a lot about Corporate Transparency Act, still a little fuzzy. Can you walk us through what the Corporate Transparency Act is, why we should care, and realistically what we should be doing to protect ourselves?
Of course. I mean, it's pretty much all I've been doing ever since getting out of law school. So, um, the Corporate Transparency Act, it's a new federal disclosure law. It was passed in 2021 and it took effect in January 1st of this year in 2024. And what it requires people to do is it requires small businesses to report information to the federal government. So, usually when you set up an LLC or a corporation, you set it up at the state level. But this law requires you to report information to the federal level. And you need to report information about the company itself and about its beneficial owners. And people really should care about it because if you don't comply with it, the penalties are very steep. If you don't report that information, you can face up to $10,000 in fines and or 2 years in prison. So, the penalties are very steep and it's really concerning that nobody's doing, there really isn't an effort to educate people on this. The government's not doing a good job. I mean, the media is focusing on the 2024 election right now. And so you have all these crazy things going on and, unfortunately the CTA is being left behind. Now, what people need to do is that in most cases, if you have a small business like an LLC, a corporation, limited partnership, anything like that, you're going to need to report this information to FinCEN, which stands for the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and it's a branch of the U.S. Department of the Treasury. You can go to the FinCEN website and do it on your own. And if you don't want to do it, we here at Corporate Direct, we built out a CTA department to do these CTA filings for people. So, if you need help with that, we'd be happy to help you and do those filings if you want to use our services.
And one thing to note, Ty, is there's an ongoing requirement. So they want not only your driver's license, but a copy of your driver's license. They want an image of either your driver's license or your passport. Now, if that passport or driver's license expires, you're required to amend this filing. And so our department, we're keeping your information in a database. So when you have a month left on your driver's license, we're going to remind you to file a new statement with the U.S. Department of Treasury. So it's just important for people to realize you file once. This year, if you've had an entity in the past, you have until the end of the year to file. If you file an entity today, you've got 90 days to file. But in the future, if some of the information changes, like if you bring in a new shareholder that has a large percentage of stock, or your driver's license or passport is renewed, you've got to file an amendment with the federal government. We don't want people to miss those deadlines because, as Ted said, the penalties are really significant.
Speaking of Ted, I would love that both you guys are involved with kids and education. Ted, tell me a little bit more about this book. 5 tricks to teach your kids about money. I love the concept just based on the title because I don't think my kids I do a good enough job teaching about money. Tell me a little bit more about the book.
Yeah, so I wrote it because there has been a push to educate people about financial education, and this has been great, but there really hasn't been a significant push to educate kids on it. And one of the questions that I got was, how exactly do you educate kids? If you're a parent, what are things that you can do to boost your kids' financial IQ? And so, there are 5 quote unquote tricks, which are really just methods that parents can use to educate their kids about money. It's a quick read. It's free. You can download it on the Sunstream website. And, I've already downloaded 200 copies. He's at 1 million right now. So I just need all the help I can to catch up to this guy. But, there is a lot of good information in there. The book is very short and concise, and it has a lot of good nuggets in there that'll boost your kids' financial IQ, which obviously in turn will produce a lot of benefits down the road.
I've noticed that when I go to corporatedirect.com, and everybody should check this out right now, Garrett is greedily putting his books first on the site. Like, so, I mean, I could see how he's got the million sales. And so I think that they can go to sunstream.com/5tricks to be able to get the book. And then the 5 is spelled out. Is that right?
Yep. Yep. So it's sunstream.com. That's SUNNSTREAM.com/5tricks, FIVETRICKS.
And joking put aside, Garrett has a lot of phenomenal books. And everybody, if you're watching this, you can go to corporatedirect.com and just scroll down a little. And when you do that, you'll find, start your own corporation. You'll find run your own corporation, fail, not fail. All those are right there amongst a lot of other free education and stuff that they have. It's worth checking out for sure at corporatedirect.com. So guys, as we get ready to wrap up, what's the single most important piece of advice, if we haven't covered it already, that you would give our listeners and watchers today? Each of you, I'd like for you to chime in if you don't mind.
Well, for me, it's just get started early. Too many people will get into business and they think, I can't afford to set up a corporation or an LLC. It's not expensive. Your audit risk is much lower with the IRS. If you operate through an LLC or corporation, the IRS will know that you're serious about your business. Too many people who operate as sole proprietors are kind of cutting corners, and the IRS goes after those people more than they do LLC or corporation owners. But at the start, I mean, if you operate individually and something happens in your business, you get sued personally and all your personal assets are exposed. Spouses really don't dig this. So you want to set these entities up right at the start and be protected right from the start.
I love that. Ted.
Yeah, and I think sort of building off what he said, it's really important to have a good team around you. When people get started in business or they get started in real estate, I mean, there's a lot of things that you don't know. And so, as I've learned, just being a young lawyer, I have a good mentor here, but at the end of the day, it takes a while to sort of get up to speed with these things. And so it's really important to have team members, an attorney, an accountant, other bookkeeping, anyone else that can help grow your business. It's really important to have them on your side and, have them to reach out to when you need help. Because when it comes to entity formation, I mean, there's a lot of different things that you need to know. And, we have 35 years of experience helping people. And if you have any questions with formation, operating agreement, maintenance, anything like that, we'd be happy to help. We'd be happy to be your team member. Because, at the end of the day, with us being on your team, your assets will be much better protected in this litigious society.
I love that. Guys, thanks very much for coming on with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ty.
Yeah,
thanks for having us.
All right. So listen, if you're watching this, as I often say, knowledge really isn't worth anything if you don't take action. And the actions you should take, there's really 2 things you should do. The first is make sure that you go to corporatedirect.com right now. Corporatedirect.com. I'll also put a link in the show resources. There's so much great information there. You can get access to all of Garrett's books right there as well. And there's also even a free newsletter. So if you just enter I think your name and your email, and you get a free newsletter, and you get regular updates, I think weekly or maybe even more often, where you get the tips and tactics on this. You can also easily just sketch. You get a free consultation. You're listening to this, you're already entitled to that. So you can go right there at the top right of the page, or a couple pages, or a couple places on the actual front page, and you can easily schedule your consultation. Calendar pops up. It's super easy to do. Go do that right now. Look, it's crazy. You're not protected. You know it. Like they're talking about this. You're like, I haven't done that. I haven't done that. Yeah, I did that. I didn't do this. 15 minutes, you see where you stand, and there's a plan that they can talk to you about to actually protect yourself and have the money and the wealth that you're working so hard to build, like, go where you want it to go, to your family, to your heirs, to the places it should go. The second thing is you want to go to sunstream.com/5tricks. That's Sunstream, SUNN stream.com/5tricks. And again, the 5 is spelled out, 5 tricks. And that's where you can actually get Ted's book.